Hey everybody, this week we're going to be talking about the difference between independent and dependent clauses. So first let's look at those two words. Independent. Independent means that you don't need anything else in order to exist. Dependent means that you do need something else in order to exist. So let's take that and apply it to an analogy. If you look at Michelle Tanner in Full House, she is dependent on the Tanner family in order to survive, right? She needs food from her dad, she needs Joey's antics to make her laugh, and the advice of Uncle Jesse. If you were to throw Michelle Tanner out in the wild, she would not be able to survive. Now if you look at Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen, they're two smart, sophisticated, independent women. They don't need anybody in order to exist anymore. Let's carry this analogy over to some work with grammar. So a question you must ask yourself when you're looking at a phrase, you're trying to consider whether or not it's a sentence or if it's a phrase, ask yourself these two questions. Does it express a complete thought? That's number one. And does it contain a subject and a verb? Okay. In order to be an independent clause, which means the same thing as a sentence, to mean the same thing, a sentence can exist completely on its own, so it's independent. It has to express a complete thought. It has to contain a subject and a verb. So that's pretty basic. But let's take a look at it real quick. Here we have they is the subject, handle is the verb, expresses a complete thought. This would meet our criteria for an independent clause. Now, if it does not meet that criteria, it's dependent. Dependent clauses cannot exist on their own. They have to be attached to a independent clause in order for them to be functional. So let's look at this, trading it back and forth. So this does not express a complete thought, and it does not contain a subject and a verb. It doesn't say who or what is trading it back and forth or taking action. So this is a dependent clause, and what we can do is attach a dependent clause to an independent clause. And let me show you what that looks like. So here we have the same sentence. They handled the BB gun carelessly, and you use a comma, and now you can stick that dependent clause on the end. So think of commas as glue that attach a dependent clause to an independent clause. And if you wanted to, you could keep adding dependent clauses. I'll just put another comma and say, you know, having a great time or having fun to make this a little faster. They handle the BB gun carelessly, trading it back and forth, having fun. Okay, so again, that comma is sticking another dependent clause on the end. So you'll use commas to sanction off each dependent clause. But just remember, this can exist completely on its own. I could put a period at the end right here, and that would be totally fine. This could not. It's a dependent clause. It doesn't say who or what is taking action here, and it doesn't express a complete thought. So this week, we're going to be focusing specifically on this sentence framework. So we're going to start with a independent clause, a complete sentence. You're going to use a comma, and then you're going to add a closer on the end, which means a dependent clause. And you can add one or two or three or however many you want. So let's take a look at a few of these examples. So I'm going to identify the independent clauses for you. Here's this one. They handle the BB gun carelessly. We've looked at this before. This is independent. I just want you to notice all of the dependent clauses attached to it. There's one here, and there's one here. So in this case, we have two dependent clauses attached to this independent clause. Again, why are these dependent clauses? Well, they don't express complete thoughts. They don't contain a subject and a verb. All right, looking at this next one, this is my independent clause. They is the subject. Are is my linking verb in this case, so it's got a subject and a verb. It expresses a complete thought. And what's attached to that is a dependent clause, asking if dinner is ready yet. It doesn't say who or what. This is not a complete sentence, so it's okay to go ahead and attach that to the independent clause. This one is dependent. Looking at another example, and Furlow found his brother in the library. So, you know, and probably not the best way to start a sentence, but it still is okay grammatically. So we've got a subject here, Furlow. What did he do? He found. So this is a complete sentence. This is an independent clause. And attached to it, we have standing on top of the great open book. Okay. and his tail wrapped tightly around his feet, and his small body shivering. So here we have three. I want you to notice sometimes to make an independent clause or a complete sentence dependent, all you're doing is removing a verb. If I said his tail was wrapped tightly around his feet, this would be a complete sentence. But by getting rid of that was and just saying his tail wrapped tightly around his feet, we can make this dependent and stick it to an independent clause. His small body shivering, I could say his small body was shivering, right? In that case, I wouldn't be able to attach this to the sentence. But by getting rid of the verb, I make this dependent clause, and it's okay to go ahead and stick with the independent clause. Another one, Abraham was growing fast, shooting up like a sunflower. All right, so I've got my sentence right here because I've got the subject, Abraham, the verb was. This is my independent clause, and I'll identify the dependent clause as shooting up like a sunflower, a spindly youngster with big bony hands, unruly black hair, a dark complexion, and luminous gray eyes. So there's actually two here. So this one and this one. So shooting up like a sunflower is describing him. And then this one, we've got some commas here, but these commas are here to separate items in a series. This would actually just be considered one independent clause. And last, let's see, she stands there. We've got a subject, she stands as the verb. Independent clause, staring at the lake, knowing that her dad is gone forever. So we'll look at this in a little more detail about what types of clauses these are, but notice that a lot of the ones we've looked at in these examples, the first word in the clause ends with ing. So you can use an ing verb or a word that ends in ed to begin your clauses if you're doing this on your homework.